Montana Territory, March 1879. The spring thaw hadn't come yet, and the ground was still frozen hard as iron when Holly Pierce stood at the edge of two fresh graves, her hands raw from digging through that unforgiving earth. The smaller coffin had taken her boy Samuel, just 7 years old. The larger one held her husband Thomas, who'd fought the fever for 6 days before his body gave out. The wind cut through her black wool dress like it meant to finish what the sickness had started. She'd buried them alone. No preacher, no neighbors. The nearest town was 2 days' ride, and by the time anyone could have come, the bodies would have turned. So she'd wrapped them herself, built the boxes from barn wood, and said the only prayers she knew. Now she stood there with Thomas's Navy Colt in her hand, the metal so cold it burned her palm. 6 bullets. She only needed 1. Samuel liked to chase butterflies, she whispered to the wind. Called them flying flowers. Thomas would lift him up on his shoulders so he could catch them. Her voice cracked. Who's going to remember that now? The barrel felt heavier than the world as she raised it to her temple. Her finger found the trigger. In her mind, she could already see it. How her blood would spray across the snow. How the coyotes would find her. How in spring someone might stumble across 3 graves instead of 2, and wonder briefly about the family that tried to make it out here and failed. Forgive me, Lord, she breathed. But you took everything. What's left for me here? That's when she heard it. Hoofbeats steady and unhurried coming up the ridge. Her finger froze on the trigger. A rider emerged from the tree line, tall in the saddle, moving with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this harsh land. He was maybe 40, weathered but not broken, with a week's worth of beard and eyes the color of winter sky. He pulled up 30 feet away, taking in the scene. The graves, the woman, the gun. He didn't reach for his own weapon, didn't shout. Just sat there quiet for a moment before dismounting slow and careful, like approaching a spooked horse. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough from trail dust. "That's a permanent solution to a temporary problem." Holly laughed bitter as alkali water. "Temporary? My husband and son are under this ground. That feel temporary to you?" "No, ma'am, it doesn't." He took a step closer, hands visible and empty. "But that gun in your hand won't bring them back. It'll just add another grave to this lonesome place. Maybe that's what I want. Maybe. But I've been riding these hills for 3 days, and yours is the first smoke I've seen from a chimney. That tells me you've got a fire going. You've got shelter. And somewhere in that cabin, you've probably got coffee that's a damn sight better than the mud I've been drinking." Holly's hand shook. "Why do you care?" "Because I've stood where you're standing. Different ground, but the same spot. Had a gun in my hand and a reason to use it. But someone talked me out of it. Figure maybe it's my turn to return the favor." The man took another step, close enough now that she could see the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into too many sunsets. "Name's Quentin Briggs. I'm not asking you to be okay. I'm not asking you to want to live. I'm just asking you to give me 5 minutes and a cup of that coffee. After that, if you still want to," he gestured at the gun, "I'll ride on and leave you to it." Holly looked at him, then back at the graves. Samuel's was so small, she'd had to fold his favorite blanket 3 times to make it fit in the box. "They were everything," she said, and the words came out broken. "I know. You don't know. You can't." Quentin was quiet for a moment. Then, "I had a sister, Sarah, sweetest soul God ever made. She married a man who turned mean when he drank, which was most nights. One winter, he beat her so bad she couldn't get out of bed. Fever took her 3 days later. I found her holding her Bible turned to Psalms, the part about walking through the valley of the shadow of death." He paused, looking past Holly at something only he could see. "I spent 6 months hunting that man. When I finally found him, I had my gun pressed to his head finger on the trigger. You know what stopped me?" Holly didn't answer, but she was listening now. I heard Sarah's voice clear as day. She said, "Don't let him make you into something you're not." And I realized if I pulled that trigger, he'd have killed both of us. Sarah's body, and my soul." The wind picked up, stirring the snow around the graves. Holly's arm was trembling now, the weight of the gun pulling it down. "Your boy and your husband," Quentin continued. "They wouldn't want this. The dead don't want company. They want the living to keep living." "How?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "How do you keep living when everything that mattered is gone? One breath at a time, one sunrise, one cup of coffee with a stranger who's got nowhere else to be." Holly looked at the gun in her hand. Thomas had taught her to shoot with it out behind the barn. Samuel had covered his ears and laughed at the sound. The memory hit her like a physical blow. "I can't," she said, but even as she spoke, her arm was lowering. "You can. You're stronger than you know. The fact you're still standing here, that you buried them proper, that you're even having this conversation, that's strength most folks don't have." The gun fell from her fingers into the snow. Holly collapsed to her knees, and the sob that tore from her throat sounded like something breaking loose from the earth itself. Quentin stood there patient as stone while she cried for the first time since Thomas had stopped breathing. When the storm of grief finally passed, leaving her empty and shaking, Quentin offered his hand. "Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze. We'll have that coffee and you can tell me about them if you want. Or we can just sit quiet. Whatever you need." Holly looked up at this stranger who'd appeared like something out of a fever dream. His hand was calloused, steady, real. She took it. As they walked toward the cabin, she glanced back once at the graves. "I'll be back," she whispered, "but not to join you. Not today." The wind carried her words across the Montana snow, and somewhere in that vast white silence, she could almost believe Thomas and Samuel heard them. The cabin was small but sturdy, built from lodgepole pine with thinking so tight you couldn't slide a knife blade through. Thomas had been proud of that, said it would stand 100 years if given the chance. Now it felt like a tomb Holly couldn't escape. Quentin ducked through the doorway, removing his hat out of habit. The space inside was neat, almost painfully so. A woman's touch in the gingham curtains, a man's in the well-oiled tools hanging by the door. A child's wooden horse sat on the mantel painted red with real horsehair for the mane. "Thomas carved that for Samuel's birthday," Holly said, following his gaze. 2 weeks before the fever came, she moved to the stove, mechanical, going through motions her body remembered even when her mind wanted to forget. The coffee pot was still warm. She'd made it this morning, thinking maybe this would be her last cup. Funny how the mind works when it's made a decision that final. "You've got a good place here," Quentin said, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight. "Good water nearby, shelter from the north wind. Your husband knew what he was doing. He was a farmer back in Ohio. Came out here for the free land, the fresh start." Holly poured 2 cups, her hands steady now. "Said we'd build something that was ours. No one to answer to but God and ourselves." She set a cup in front of him, noticed how he wrapped both hands around it, seeking warmth. Up close, she could see the scars, one across his knuckles, another disappearing into his collar. This was a man who'd seen his share of violence. "You're not a farmer," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am, I was cavalry. 7th Regiment under Custer until I had enough of following orders that didn't make sense. Been drifting since doing what work comes. Cattle drives mostly, some scouting for the railroad." "Why were you riding these hills?" Quentin took a long sip before answering. "Looking for a place to winter, maybe longer. I'm tired of drifting. Thought maybe I'd find some abandoned claim, fix it up." He paused. Didn't expect to find this. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken things. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows Thomas had paid extra to have shipped from Denver. Real glass, not oiled paper. Another source of pride. The fever came 3 weeks back, Holly said suddenly, like a dam breaking. Started in town at the trading post. Mackenzie's boy brought it home from school. Spread through the valley like wildfire. The Hendersons, the Clearys, the widow Watson, all gone. We thought being out here isolated we'd be safe. She stared into her coffee. Thomas went to town for supplies. Must have caught it there. He was strong, fought it hard, but once Samuel took sick, her voice trailed off. Children go quick with fever, Quentin said quietly. It's a mercy in its way. Mercy. Holly laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what the preacher would say. Isn't it God's mercy? God's plan? Well, I don't much care for God's planning these days. Can't say I blame you. She looked at him sharply surprised. Most men would have scolded her for blasphemy, but Quentin just sat there comfortable with her anger, not trying to fix it or explain it away. Tell me about your war, she said. You said you had enough of following orders. What happened? Quentin was quiet for a long moment, and Holly thought he might not answer. Then, Washita River, winter of '68. We rode into a Cheyenne camp at dawn. Custer called it a battle. It wasn't. It was a slaughter. Women, children, old men. I watched a trooper shoot a boy no older than your Samuel. Boy was running for the river, probably scared out of his mind. Trooper shot him in the back, then scalped him for the bounty. His hands tightened on the cup. I put my gun to that trooper's head. Told him if he touched another child, I'd paint his brains across the snow. Got me 30 days in the stockade and a dishonorable discharge. Best thing that ever happened to me. I couldn't serve under a flag that allowed such things. But you still carry a gun. Out here, a man without a gun is just a corpse that hasn't fallen yet. But I choose my fights now. Choose what's worth killing for what's worth dying for. Holly stood, moved to the window. The graves were visible from here, 2 dark rectangles against the white. I was pregnant once before Samuel. Lost it at 4 months. Thomas built a tiny coffin no bigger than a shoebox. We buried it under that pine, the tall one. No name, no marker, just a prayer and a promise to try again. She turned back to him. This land takes everything, your children, your dreams, your faith. It grinds you down until there's nothing left but stubbornness and spite. Sometimes that's enough. Is it look at me? 28 years old, and I've got nothing but a cabin full of ghosts and land that won't grow anything but sorrow. Quentin stood cross to where she stood, not close enough to crowd, but close enough that she could feel the solid presence of him. You've got more than that. You've got strength. Most women, hell, most men would have given up weeks ago, but you buried your family proper. You kept the fire going. You made coffee this morning, even thinking it might be your last. That's not nothing. That's everything. I don't feel strong. I feel empty. Empty can be filled. Dead can't. A wolf howled somewhere in the distance, long and mournful. Others joined it, a chorus of wild grief that seemed to echo Holly's own heart. There's a pack denning about 3 miles north, Quentin said. Been tracking them. They're hungry. This winter's been hard on everything. They came around last week. Thomas fired his rifle, scared them off. They'll be back. Wolves can smell weakness, same as men. Holly looked at him. Is that what you smell on me? Weakness. No, ma'am. I smell grief, which is different. Grief means you had something worth losing. Weakness means you never had anything at all. She considered this. You talk like a philosopher. Had a lot of time to think riding alone. Man gets philosophical when it's just him and the horizon. And what great truths have you discovered? That mostly people are trying their best with what they've got. That the land doesn't care about our plans or our pain. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is just keep breathing until breathing gets easier. Holly moved back to the table, sat down heavy. I don't even know why I'm talking to you. You're a stranger. You could be anyone. Could be here to rob me, kill me. Could be, Quentin agreed, sitting back down across from her. But if I was, I'd have done it already. Wouldn't have wasted good coffee on conversation. Despite everything, Holly felt the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. It is good coffee. Best I've had in months. Your husband teach you to make it?" "No, that was all me. Thomas liked his coffee. Week said mine could float a horseshoe, but he drank it anyway. Man knows when he's got something good." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Holly asked, "What were you really doing out here?" 3 days riding these hills, you said. That's not looking for a place to winter. That's looking for something specific." Quentin studied her for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "There's been trouble. Riders hitting homesteads along the eastern range, taking what they want, leaving bodies behind. I've been tracking them." Holly's blood went cold. "How many riders?" 5, maybe 6, led by a man named Braden Lott. You heard the name." The cup slipped from Holly's fingers, shattering on the floor. Coffee spread like blood across the boards. Her face had gone white as the snow outside. "I see you have," Quentin said quietly. Holly stood abruptly, backing away from the table. "You need to leave. Now." "Holly, how do you know my name? I never told you my name." Quentin held up his hands, peaceful. "You did, when you were talking about Samuel." Had she? Holly couldn't remember. The morning felt like a fever dream, disconnected from reality. "Braden Lott." She said the name like poison on her tongue. "You're hunting Braden Lott. You know him." It wasn't a question, but Holly answered anyway. "He's my father." The words hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Quentin didn't move, didn't reach for his weapon, just watched as Holly pressed herself against the wall, arms wrapped around her middle like she was holding herself together. "Your father," he repeated, voice neutral. "Braden Lott is your father." "Was. He was my father. I haven't seen him in 12 years. Haven't wanted to." Holly's laugh was sharp, brittle. "God of all the men to ride up to my door. A bounty hunter looking for my father." "I'm not a bounty hunter, just a man who doesn't like seeing innocent people hurt." "There are no innocent people in Braden Lott's world. You're either his enemy or his property. I spent 16 years learning that lesson." She moved to the stove, began cleaning up the spilled coffee with shaking hands. Quentin wanted to help, but sensed she needed the action, needed something to do, while her mind raced. "Tell me," he said quietly. Holly wrung out the rag water brown with coffee. "Why?" "So you can track him better. Use me as bait." "So I can understand." She looked at him, then really looked. His eyes were steady, patient. Not the eyes of a man looking for advantage, but of someone who'd seen enough pain to recognize it in others. "My mother was 15 when Braden took her from a wagon train he'd raided. Kept her for 2 years, long enough to get her pregnant with me. She died giving birth. Braden always said it was her weakness that killed her, but the midwife told me different when I was older. Said my mother fought to stay alive just long enough to see me breathe, then let go. Said she whispered, 'Be better than him,' before she passed." Holly sat back down, the rag forgotten in her hands. "Braden raised me like he was raising a wolf pup. Taught me to shoot, to ride, to read people's weaknesses. By the time I was 8, I could pick a pocket or pick a lock. By 10, I was the distraction while his men robbed stores. Sweet little girl with big eyes who'd suspect that's no childhood. It was the only one I had. And for a while, I thought it was normal, thought every father taught his daughter to lie and steal and survive. The other men in the gang, they were almost kind to me. Uncle Jake taught me to read using wanted posters. Uncle Will showed me how to tend wounds, said it was a useful skill in our line of work." She stood again, restless, moved to the window. "But then I got older, and I started to see what we really were, what I was becoming, the families we destroyed, the fear in people's eyes. There was this one time, a family just like mine is now. Was. Father, mother, little boy. We robbed their store, and the father tried to fight back. Braden shot him in front of his family. The look on that little boy's face." Her voice trailed off. "That was the night I decided to run. I was 14. Stole one of the horses and rode until it nearly died under me. Made it to a mission school in Colorado. The sisters took me in, didn't ask questions, gave me a new name, Holly Pierce. Holly for the Christmas season when I arrived, Pierce for the way truth had pierced my heart. But Braden found you. No, he let me go. That's what haunts me. He could have tracked me easy, but he didn't. Uncle Jake told me later when I saw him in a town years past. Said Braden considered it my testing. If I survived on my own, I was truly his blood. If I didn't, I wasn't worth retrieving. Quentin absorbed this understanding, settling over his features. But you did survive. I did. The sisters taught me to read proper, to write, to behave like a lady. They tried to teach me about God's love, but that lesson never quite took. Hard to believe in a loving God when you've seen what men do in his absence. She turned from the window. When I was 18, I left the mission, worked as a seamstress, a cook, whatever honest work I could find. That's how I met Thomas. He came into the restaurant where I was working, ordered coffee and pie, and left a $1 tip on a 10-cent meal. Next day, same thing. Day after that, he finally got the courage to ask my name. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He courted me proper. Flowers Walks never tried anything improper. When he proposed, I told him everything. About Braden, about what I'd been. Know what he said. What he said, that's who you were. I'm asking to marry who you are. So I did. We came out here far from anywhere Braden might be. Started fresh. Had Samuel. Built a life that was clean and honest and good. Until the fever. Until the fever. Holly's hands clenched. And now you tell me Braden's riding these hills, killing families. The very thing I ran from has found me anyway. You think he knows you're here? I don't know. Maybe. Braden always said blood calls to blood. Said no matter how far I ran, I'd always be his daughter. Quentin was quiet for a moment, processing. Then the graves. He'll see the graves and know it's not you. Unless he thinks I died too. Unless... Holly's eyes widened. Oh God, what if he comes here? What if he finds me alone? He won't. You don't know that. I do, because I'm not leaving. Holly stared at him. You can't stay here. People will talk. Let them talk. I'm not leaving you alone with Braden Lott possibly heading this way. I don't need protection. I know. You're Braden Lott's daughter. You can probably shoot better than me, ride harder, and survive longer, but that's not why I'm staying. Then why? Quentin stood cross to where she stood by the window. Because 12 years ago, you chose to be better than what you were raised to be. That takes a kind of courage most people never find. And because this morning you almost gave up, and I'll be damned if I let Braden Lott be the thing that pushes you over that edge, even indirectly. You don't owe me anything. No, but I owe Sarah, my sister. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can do right by someone else who needs it. Holly studied his face, searching for deception, for angle, for anything that suggested he was playing her. But all she saw was steady determination and something else. Understanding maybe, or recognition of one damaged soul to another. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I haven't told anyone, not even Thomas. Quentin waited. I'm pregnant. About 2 months along, Thomas died not knowing he was going to be a father again. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. A pregnant widow, alone on the frontier with her outlaw father, possibly heading her way. Quentin understood now why she'd been ready to use that gun this morning. Does anyone else know? No. I only realized it myself last week, after Thomas was already sick. I was going to tell him when he got better. Her voice broke slightly. Now this child will never know its father will grow up with Braden Lott's blood in its veins. What kind of life is that? The kind where the child gets to choose who they become, same as you did. But what if the blood tells? What if, despite everything, the child turns out like him? Quentin thought of the boy he'd failed to save at Washita River, the trooper who'd killed him, the thin line between good and evil that every person walked daily. Then you raise them with love and truth and hope they choose better. It's all any parent can do. Holly touched her still flat stomach, protective and fearful at once. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this alone. You won't be alone. You can't stay here indefinitely. You have your own life, your own path. My path led me here this morning right when you needed someone. Maybe that means something. Maybe it doesn't. But I'm not leaving until I know you're safe. And if Braden comes, then we face him together. You'd stand against Braden Lott for a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. You're Holly Pierce, widow, expectant mother, and survivor. That's enough for me. Holly felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but breaking open, like ice on a river starting to flow again. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything. Just make more of that coffee. We're going to need it. As Holly moved to the stove, Quentin watched the sun track across the sky. Somewhere out there, Braden Lott was riding, leaving death in his wake. But here, in this small cabin marked by grief, something else was taking root. Not quite hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. Quentin, Holly said suddenly. That trooper at Washita River. What happened to him? Someone shot him a week later. Never found out who. Holly nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. Sometimes justice came from unexpected places. Sometimes the past had to be buried before the future could grow. Outside, the wind had calmed. The wolves were silent. And in the quiet of the afternoon, two damaged souls sat with their coffee and their secrets, preparing for whatever came next. 3 days passed in an uneasy rhythm. Quentin slept in the barn close enough to hear trouble, but far enough to preserve what was left of Holly's reputation. Each morning he'd knock soft on the cabin door, wait for her to answer before entering. They'd share coffee and breakfast, talking about everything except what hung between them. Her pregnancy, her father, the growing feeling that something was shifting in the space they shared. On the fourth morning, Holly woke to the sound of retching. Morning sickness had found her at last violent and unforgiving. She barely made it to the wash basin before her stomach emptied itself of nothing. She hadn't been able to eat much since Thomas died. Her body shook with the effort, cold sweat beading on her forehead. The knock came as usual. "Holly, you all right in there?" "Fine," she managed, though her voice was raw. "Just give me a moment." But the moment stretched into minutes, and when the sickness hit again, she couldn't muffle the sound. The door opened. She'd forgotten to bar it, and Quentin was there, taking in the scene with quick understanding. "Go away," she said, mortified. "Please." Instead, he wet a cloth with cool water from the pitcher, handed it to her without comment. Then he busied himself at the stove, giving her privacy while staying close enough to help if needed. "My sister went through this with her first." He set his back to her. "Ginger helps if you have any. Peppermint, too. There's dried mint in the pantry," Holly said weakly, wiping her face with the cloth. "Third shelf." He found it set water to boiling. The domestic simplicity of it, a man making tea while she fought her own body's rebellion, struck her as both absurd and oddly comforting. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Do it, make tea. It's not exactly heroic work. Stay, deal with this." She gestured vaguely at herself. "It's only going to get worse and more obvious." Quentin turned, then really looked at her. Hair, disheveled face, pale, one hand pressed protective over her stomach. "You think I care about that? You should. A man traveling with a pregnant widow. People will assume things. People assume things anyway. Let them." He brought her the tea, watched as she sipped it carefully. The mint did help settling her stomach enough that she could breathe without fear. "Why?" she asked. "Really, why are you doing this?" Quentin sat across from her, considering his words. "You ever see a bird build a nest after a storm destroyed the first one? What? Just answer." "Yes, I suppose." "They don't hesitate, don't mourn. They just start gathering twigs again, building in the same tree that failed to protect them before. Always seemed either foolish or brave to me. Maybe both." Holly set down the cup. Am I the bird in this comparison? We both are. Storm took your nest, took your mate. Storm took my sister, my purpose in the cavalry. But here we are gathering twigs. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Before Holly could respond, they heard it. Horses. Multiple horses moving fast up the trail. Quentin was on his feet, instantly rifle in hand. Holly grabbed Thomas's Navy Colt from the shelf. Stay inside, Quentin ordered, already moving for the door. Like hell. They positioned themselves at windows, watching as 5 riders crested the hill. Holly's blood went cold. She knew that silhouette the way he sat a horse, like he was part of it. It's him, she whispered. Braden. The riders stopped just outside rifle range. Smart. Braden Lott hadn't survived 20 years of outlawing by being careless. He raised one hand, the gesture somehow managing to be both greeting and threat. Hello, the cabin. His voice carried clear across the distance. Looking for water and news. We mean no harm to peaceful folk. Quentin glanced at Holly. Her face had gone hard, unreadable. Your call, he said quietly. He doesn't know it's me. Can't know. But if we turn him away, he'll get suspicious. Holly thought fast. Her father had taught her to survive, and sometimes survival meant facing danger head on. We let them water their horses. Nothing more. Quentin nodded. Stay back from the door. Keep that Colt ready. He stepped onto the porch rifle, casual but ready. Water's in the trough by the barn. Help yourselves. The riders moved forward slowly. As they got closer, Holly could make out faces. Uncle Jake was there, older now, gray threading his beard. Will, too, though he'd lost an eye somewhere along the way. 2 others she didn't recognize, young and hungry-looking. And Braden. Her father had aged hard. Deep lines carved his face, and his dark hair had gone steel gray. But his eyes were the same. Cold blue, sharp as winter sky. Eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes found the graves immediately. Recent loss, Braden asked, dismounting smooth despite his years. Fever, Quentin replied shortly. Shame. Fever's been bad this spring, taking the weak and the young. Braden's gaze swept the cabin, lingered on the window where Holly stood hidden. You alone here. My wife's inside. She's grieving. Course she is. Braden moved to the trough, let his horse drink, but his attention never left the cabin. Funny thing, we passed through Millfield yesterday. They mentioned a Pierce family out this way. Man, woman, boy. But those graves. 2 of them are smaller than they should be, Jake said quietly, and Holly's heart stopped. Jake had always been the smart one, the one who noticed details. That's so. Braden turned back to Quentin. You wouldn't be lying to me, would you, friend? Don't see how it's your business, either way. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The younger outlaws shifted hands toward their guns. But Braden just smiled, cold and amused. Everything in this territory is my business. You see, I'm looking for someone. A woman, about 28, dark hair, gray eyes. Might be going by the name Pierce. That's half the women in Montana. This one's special. She's family. Quentin didn't flinch. Haven't seen anyone like that. No. Well, maybe your wife has. Women talk to each other different than to men. Braden took a step toward the cabin. Ma'am, might I have a word? Holly knew she had no choice. Hiding would only confirm suspicions. She tucked the Colt into her apron pocket, arranged her features into vacant grief, and opened the door. She'd forgotten how her father's presence could fill a space, make everything else seem smaller. But she wasn't 16 anymore, wasn't the scared girl who'd run in the night. She was Holly Pierce, widow and mother-to-be, and she'd be damned if she'd show fear now. Yes, she said, voice carefully neutral. Braden studied her for a long moment. Holly had changed. Life and loss had carved new lines in her face, and her hair was different, pulled back severe instead of loose, like she'd worn it as a girl. But would it be enough? Sorry for your loss, ma'am, Braden said finally. Your husband and boy. Yes. You have the look of someone I once knew. You from around here originally. Ohio. Holly said truthfully. Came out with my husband 2 years ago. Ohio. Braden smiled, didn't reach his eyes. And your maiden name, Carpenter. Carpenter. He rolled the name around like he was tasting it. You sure about that? That's when Holly saw it, the recognition in Jake's eyes. He knew. Had probably known from the moment she stepped outside, but Jake had always been fond of her in his way. Their eyes met across the yard, and she saw him make a choice. Boss, Jake said, we should move. That posse from Millfield might still be tracking us. Braden ignored him, still studying Holly. You know Mrs. Pierce. It is Pierce, isn't it? You remind me of my daughter. Haven't seen her in years. She'd be about your age now. I hope you find her, Holly said steadily. Oh, I will. Blood always finds blood. It's a law of nature. He tipped his hat. Thank you for the water. The outlaws mounted up, but before they rode off, Braden turned back. Oh, one more thing. That grave, the smaller one. Boy or girl? Boy. Holly said the word, scraping her throat. Shame. Boys are harder to replace than girls. His eyes bored into hers. But I expect you'll try again. Women like you, strong stock. You don't give up easy. There was weight in those words, meaning beneath meaning. He knew. Maybe not for certain, but he suspected. Take care, Mrs. Pierce. These are dangerous times for a woman alone. She's not alone, Quentin said firmly. Braden's gaze shifted to him, assessing. No. Well, then you take good care of her friend. Woman like that, with that kind of strength, she's rare, worth protecting. They rode off, then dust rising behind them like smoke. Holly stood frozen until they disappeared over the ridge, then her knees gave out. Quentin caught her before she hit the ground. He knows, she gasped. He knows it's me. Maybe, but he left. That doesn't mean anything. Braden plays long games. He'll be back. Quentin helped her inside, set her in a chair. Her hands were shaking. Then we'll be ready. You don't understand. My father doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. He let me go once because I was a child, but now I'm a woman, and I'm carrying a child. His bloodline. You don't know, that's why. Yes, I do. Holly pressed her hands to her stomach. He saw it. Somehow he knew. Did you see how he looked at me? Strong stock, he said. Worth protecting. He wasn't talking to you. He was talking to me, telling me he knows about the baby. Quentin knelt in front of her, took her shaking hands in his steady ones. Then we leave, tonight. Pack what you need, and we ride. Where? Where can we go that Braden Lott won't find us? North. Canada, maybe. Or west to California. Somewhere far enough that it's not worth his time to follow. Holly laughed bitterly. You do that. Leave everything, become a fugitive for a woman you met 4 days ago. I'd do it for someone who deserves a chance at peace. She looked at him, then really looked. This man who'd appeared at her darkest moment, who'd stayed despite having every reason to leave. Why do you care so much? Because I've been running from my own ghosts for 10 years. Sarah Washita River, all of it. And it doesn't work. The ghosts follow. But maybe if I help you face yours, we both get free. That's not how it works. How do you know you ever try facing them with someone beside you? The question hung between them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Storm coming. There was always a storm coming in Montana. He'll use the baby, Holly said quietly. If it's a boy, he'll want to raise him like he raised me. If it's a girl, she couldn't finish. Then we make sure he never gets the chance. You're talking about killing my father. I'm talking about protecting your child, whatever that takes. Holly stood, moved to the window. The graves were still visible dark against the fading light. Thomas would have fought for their child, died for it if necessary. But Thomas was gone, and this stranger was offering to take his place. There's something else, she said. Something I should tell you before you make any grand gestures." Quentin waited. "I know where Braden camps, where he keeps his money, his supplies. I could find it even after all these years. And I know his patterns, his habits, how he thinks, how he plans." She turned to face him. "If we're going to run, we could hurt him first. Take his money, destroy his supplies, leave him weak. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. But at least this way we're not just running, we're fighting back." Quentin stood slowly. "You're talking about war." "I'm talking about survival, my child's survival." Her hand went to her stomach again. "This baby is all I have left of Thomas. I won't let Braden corrupt it like he tried to corrupt me. And if we fail, if he catches us, then we die. But at least we die trying." Quentin studied her face, saw the determination there, the steel beneath the grief. This wasn't the broken woman he'd found 4 days ago. This was Braden Lott's daughter, but more than that, this was a mother protecting her unborn child. "All right," he said. "We hit him tonight while he's not expecting it. Then we run fast and far." "You're sure?" "I'm sure that child deserves better than looking over its shoulder forever. And I'm sure you deserve the chance to give it that life." Holly crossed to him, stopped just close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her gray eyes. "I don't even know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We haven't survived this." "No, but for the first time since Thomas died, I think we might." She reached out, touched his hand briefly. The contact was electric, unexpected. They both pulled back, aware suddenly of the line they were approaching. "We should prepare," Holly said, voice carefully neutral. "Yes." But neither moved. The moment stretched fragile as spun glass. Then Holly turned away, began gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Quentin watched her for a moment. This remarkable woman who'd survived so much and wasn't done fighting yet, then joined her preparations. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming faster than expected, but for once Holly wasn't afraid of what it might bring. Sometimes storms cleared the air, sometimes they washed the world clean, and sometimes they provided perfect cover for what needed to be done in the dark. Sadr Maris, the storm hit just after midnight, turning the world into a chaos of wind and water. Holly stood in the barn, saddling her mare, while Quentin loaded the supplies they'd need. She'd changed into men's clothes, Thomas's clothes, and the familiar weight of them made her chest tight with memory. "You don't have to do this," Quentin said for the third time. "I can go alone. You don't know where the camp is. You don't know their signals, their guards." Holly tightened the saddle cinch with practiced hands. "Besides, this is my fight. Our fight now." She looked at him through the rain-filtered darkness. Why make it yours?" Lightning illuminated his face for a heartbeat. "Because someone needs to." They rode out into the storm, Holly leading through paths she'd learned as a child. Memory was a strange thing. Her body remembered the way, even as her mind recoiled from it. 3 miles north, then east along the creek, was the old lightning-struck oak would mark the turn if it still stood. It did. 12 years, and it was still there, split down the middle, but somehow alive, like her. "We leave the horses here," she whispered, though the storm would have covered any sound. "Quarter mile on foot." They tied the horses in a grove of cottonwoods, took only what they'd need, rope oil for burning, and guns they hoped not to use. Holly led the way through undergrowth she knew by feel until the glow of campfires became visible through the trees. The camp was exactly as she remembered. Braden never changed what worked. 3 fires in a triangle tent, arranged for quick escape supplies in the center where they could be defended. And there, the cave entrance where he kept his treasure. Not gold mostly, but guns, ammunition, things that could be traded for loyalty or survival. 2 guards, Quentin breathed in her ear. Maybe 3. 4. There's always one in the rocks above the cave. She was right. When lightning flashed again, they saw the silhouette rifle across his knees. But the storm was their ally. The guards were miserable, huddled under what shelter they could find, attention turned inward against the rain. The supplies first, Holly whispered. Then the cave. We burn what we can't take. They moved like ghosts through the rain. Holly's hands remembered skills she'd tried to forget. How to walk without sound, how to use darkness like a cloak. They reached the supply tent without alerting anyone. Inside, stacked neat, as Braden always demanded, were crates of ammunition, bags of grain, medical supplies, stolen from God knows where. Holly began dousing everything with oil, while Quentin kept watch. That's when they heard it, a child crying. Holly froze. That sound didn't belong here. She crept to the tent's edge, peered through the rain toward the sound. In one of the smaller tents, a woman was trying to quiet a baby, her face stark with fear, even in the darkness. Prisoners, Quentin whispered. Or worse. Holly's jaw clenched. Some things about her father hadn't changed. Women taken in raids kept until they were used up or sold. The baby couldn't be more than months old. Change of plans, she said. Holly, we're taking them with us. That's not... She turned on him, eyes fierce. I won't leave them. Not a woman and baby. Not with him. Quentin read the determination in her face and nodded. Then we do it fast. They struck like the lightning overhead. Holly went for the woman's tent while Quentin handled the guard. The struggle was brief, silent. Quentin knew how to disable a man without killing him. Barely. The woman shrank back when Holly entered, clutching her baby tight. She was young, maybe 19, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much. I'm here to help, Holly whispered urgently. We're leaving. Now. He'll find us. He'll kill us. Not if we burn this place to the ground first. Can you ride? The girl nodded, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in God knows how long. They made it to the cave before the alarm was raised. Holly knew the combination. Braden's arrogance assumed no one would dare rob him. Inside were weapons cache and documents that probably implicated half the corrupt officials in the territory. Take the money, Holly said, stuffing bills into a sack. Leave the guns, too heavy. That's when Braden's voice cut through the storm. Holly Marie Lott. She went cold. He was using her real name, the one she'd buried. I know you're here, girl. Can smell that righteousness from here thick as your mother's perfume. Quentin grabbed her arm. We go. Now. But Holly was already moving, grabbing one more thing from the cave. A leather journal she knew contained names, dates, crimes, evidence. Then she threw the oil lamp against the remaining supplies. The fire caught fast despite the rain ammunition beginning to cook off in explosive pops. They ran through the chaos, the woman stumbling behind them with her baby wailing. Guards were emerging from tents, confused shouting. A shot rang out, then another. There, Jake's voice. He'd spotted them at the tree line. Holly turned, raised Thomas's Navy Colt and fired. Not to kill. She put the bullet exactly where she meant to, into the ground at Jake's feet. A warning, a message. He stopped understanding, passing between them across the distance. They reached the horses as more shots split the night. Quentin lifted the woman onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Holly mounted her mare, and they rode hard into the storm. Behind them, the camp burned. Ammunition continued to explode, creating a deadly fireworks show that would keep anyone from pursuing immediately. But Holly knew it was temporary. Braden would come. He'd have to now. They rode for 2 hours through the storm before stopping at an abandoned line shack Holly remembered from childhood. The woman, Mary they'd learned, was exhausted, her baby fussing with hunger. We can't stay long, Holly said, though she was swaying on her feet. Long enough to rest, Quentin insisted. The horses need it, even if you don't. Mary was trying to nurse her baby, but Holly could see she had little milk. Malnutrition and fear had dried her up. Holly found some canned milk in their supplies, showed Mary how to feed it to the baby with a rag. Why? Mary asked quietly. Why save us? Because someone should have saved me when I was young, Holly replied. No one did. Quentin was keeping watch at the window. Holly, we need to decide. Where are we going? She looked at Mary and the baby, at this man who'd thrown away his safety for strangers. The weight of Thomas's child in her womb seemed heavier, suddenly more real. "There's a preacher in Stillwater Basin," she said. "Father Miguel. He runs a mission, helps people disappear when they need to. He helped me once." "That's a week's ride." "I know. But Braden won't expect it. He'd expect me to run far, not hide close." She turned to Mary. "Can you make it a week?" Mary nodded, steel showing through her exhaustion. "I'd ride a month to keep my baby from that monster." "Then it's decided." Holly moved to where Quentin stood at the window. "You can still leave. This isn't your fight." He turned to her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "You asked why I'm making this my fight. You want the truth?" "Yes. Because when I found you at those graves ready to end everything I saw myself. After Sarah died, I stood at her grave with my service pistol, same as you. And someone stopped me. An old Apache scout who barely spoke English. He said something I didn't understand then, but I do now." "What?" "He said the dead don't need company. They need witnesses. I've been wandering for 10 years, Holly, but when I saw you, I finally understood. I'm supposed to witness, to help you live when you wanted to die, to make sure that baby gets born into a better world than either of us knew." Holly felt tears she hadn't cried since Thomas died, threatening to spill. "That's a heavy burden to put on yourself. No heavier than the one you're carrying." His hand moved toward her stomach, stopped just short of touching. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His hand settled gently on the slight swell, hidden by Thomas's loose shirt. The baby was too small to move yet, but somehow Holly felt it respond to the touch. Or maybe that was her own response, the flutter of something she'd thought died with Thomas. "I've decided something," Quentin said quietly. "When we get to Father Miguel's, I'm going to ask him to marry us." Holly pulled back, shocked. "What? Hear me out." A pregnant widow traveling with a man raises questions. A married couple with a baby on the way doesn't. It's protection. That's insane. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and strong and carrying a child that needs a father's name. I know Braden is less likely to challenge a husband's claim than a stranger's. You're talking about a paper marriage. A lie. I'm talking about survival, yours and the baby's." He paused. Unless what? Unless you think it could be more than paper." The words hung between them like a held breath. Holly thought of Thomas, barely cold in his grave, thought of the vows she'd made, the love they'd shared, then thought of this man who'd stayed when he had every reason to run. "I can't love you," she said honestly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. My heart's buried with Thomas. I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for a chance to earn it, however long that takes. And if it never happens, then I'll be the best father I can to that child and the best friend I can to you. That's enough." Mary spoke from the corner where she was rocking her baby. "Say yes." They both turned to her, having forgotten she was there. "I'm sorry," Mary continued, "but say yes. I married for love once. He died in a mining accident, left me with nothing. Braden's men found me begging in the streets. If I'd had a protector, any protector." She trailed off. "Love's a luxury women like us can't afford. Safety isn't." Holly looked between them. This woman who'd suffered so much, this man offering something she didn't know how to accept. "I need time to think." "Time's the one thing we don't have," Quentin said gently. "Braden will come. When he does what looks stronger, his daughter under the protection of a lone drifter, or his daughter married to a man with legal claim to her and her child." He was right. Holly knew he was right. But it felt like betrayal standing here discussing marriage while Thomas's grave was still fresh. Then she felt it, the slightest flutter in her belly. Not movement, not yet, but presence. Thomas's child demanding its chance at life. "All right," she whispered. "For the baby. For protection. Nothing more." Nothing more. Quentin agreed. though something in his eyes suggested he hoped for different. "We should move," Holly said, needing to break the moment. "Storm's passing." They prepared to ride again, but before they left, Holly pulled out Braden's journal, showed Quentin what she'd taken. Names, dates every crime for 5 years, including 3 federal judges he's been bribing. Quentin whistled low. "He'll never stop hunting us for this." "Good, let him come. But now we have leverage." She tucked the journal away. "He touches us, this goes to the federal marshals. You'd turn in your own father. That man stopped being my father the day he let my mother die." Holly's voice was hard as Montana winter. "He's just another outlaw now." They rode out as dawn broke through the dissipating storm clouds. 4 souls running toward an uncertain future, a widow, a drifter, a rescued woman, and a baby who'd never know its father. Behind them, smoke still rose from Braden's camp. Ahead lay Stillwater Basin and Father Miguel's mission. And somewhere between the two, Holly realized lay the possibility of something she'd never expected. A second chance at life, even if it came wrapped in necessity rather than love. "Holly," Quentin said as they rode, "that Apache scout who saved me, he said one other thing." "What?" "Sometimes the Great Spirit sends us what we need, disguised as what we fear." Holly considered this, one hand on her belly, the other on her reins. "You think that's what this is, what we are? I think we're about to find out." They rode on through the morning light, the storm-washed world gleaming like it had been made new. And maybe Holly thought it had. Maybe they all had. Father Miguel's mission sat in a valley where 3 creeks converged, hidden from the main trail, by a stand of ancient cottonwoods. The buildings were adobe and timber, worn smooth by wind and time, with a bell tower that leaned slightly east, as if listening for trouble. Holly hadn't been here in 10 years, but the moment she saw it, her shoulders dropped from their defensive hunch. This place had meant safety once. Maybe it could again. Father Miguel emerged before they'd even dismounted, an old man, now his hair gone completely white, but his eyes still sharp as flint. He took in their ragged group with one sweeping glance, his gaze lingering on Holly's face. "Holly Lott," he said quietly. "I wondered if I'd see you again." "It's Pierce now, Father. Holly Pierce." "Is it?" His eyes moved to Quentin, to Mary, and her baby, then back to Holly. "Come inside. You look like you've been riding with the devil at your heels." "Close enough," Quentin muttered. The mission hadn't changed much. Same rough wooden pews in the chapel, same smell of candle wax and sage. Father Miguel led them to his private quarters, gestured for them to sit. Mary collapsed into a chair, the baby finally sleeping in her arms. "Tell me," Father Miguel said simply. So Holly told him. Everything. Thomas's death, Quentin's arrival, Braden's appearance, the raid on the camp. The old priest listened without interruption, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "And what is it you need from me?" "Sanctuary," Holly said. "For Mary and her child, at least." "And for you." Holly glanced at Quentin. "A wedding." Father Miguel's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your husband is barely cold child." "I know, but—" "It's for protection," Quentin interrupted. "My idea, Father. A married woman has legal standing, a widow doesn't, especially against someone like Braden Lott." "Ah." Father Miguel studied them both. "A marriage of convenience, then." "Yes," Holly said quickly. "No," Quentin said at the same time. They looked at each other, and Father Miguel actually smiled. "I see. Well, that's something to work out between yourselves. But I have conditions." "Anything," Holly said. "First, you stay here at least 2 weeks. You need rest, proper food. That baby you're carrying needs its mother strong, not running on fear and exhaustion." Holly's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "You can tell." "Child, I've been marrying and burying folks for 40 years. I know a woman with child when I see one. He turned to Quentin. Second, if I marry you, it's real. No annulments later, no taking it lightly. In God's eyes and the laws, you'll be bound. I understand, Quentin said steadily. This isn't just about protecting her from Braden. You're taking on another man's child, a woman still grieving, and troubles that may follow you forever. I understand, Quentin repeated. Father Miguel turned back to Holly. And you, child, you understand what you're asking this man to do. Holly looked at Quentin, then really looked. Trail dust had settled into the lines around his eyes. His clothes were worn, patched. He owned nothing but his horse and guns, and he was offering to bind his life to hers. I understand, she said softly. Good. Then we wait a week. Let you both be certain. In the meantime, you'll help with the mission work. Nothing builds clarity like honest labor. The week that followed was the strangest Holly had experienced. By day, she helped the mission women with cooking and washing her hands, remembering skills from her time here as a girl. Mary recovered slowly, color returning to her cheeks, her baby beginning to thrive on regular feeding. Quentin worked with the men repairing the chapel roof, his presence causing a stir among the local women. More than one found reasons to bring water to the workers' eyes, lingering on the tall stranger with the gentle hands and sad eyes. You've got admirers, Holly said one evening, finding him alone by the creek. Do I? He didn't look up from the piece of wood he was whittling. Maria brought you water 3 times today. That's twice more than anyone else got. Maria's kind. Maria's available. Now he did look up. I'm not. You could be. You don't owe me anything, Quentin. We could tell Father Miguel we changed our minds. He set down the wood. She could see now it was a toy horse, probably for Mary's baby. Is that what you want? Holly sat beside him on the creek bank, careful to leave space between them. I want you to be sure. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm pregnant with another man's child. I'm grieving. I may never love you the way you deserve. You think I deserve love? The question surprised her. Everyone does. Even men who've killed, who failed to save the people. They should have protected even them. They sat in silence, watching the water run. Then Quentin said, I keep thinking about something. That morning, I found you. I almost didn't ride that trail. Something made me turn that way at the last minute. Call it God. Call it fate. Call it dumb luck. But I was meant to find you. To save me. No, you saved yourself. You lowered that gun before I said a word that mattered. But maybe we were meant to save each other. Holly felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to be married to someone I don't love. I don't know how to pretend. Then don't pretend. Be honest. Be yourself. That's enough. Is it? He turned to her fully then. Holly, I'm not Thomas. I'm not trying to be. I'm just a man offering to stand between you and trouble, to help raise a child that needs a father, to be whatever you need me to be for as long as you need it. And what do you get out of it? Purpose, place, a reason to stop drifting. He paused. And maybe someday the chance to earn something more. Before Holly could respond, they heard horses. A lot of horses. Both were on their feet, instantly hands going to weapons. But it wasn't Braden. It was a federal marshal's posse, 6 men with badges and tired faces. They spoke with Father Miguel. Then the marshal approached Holly and Quentin. You Holly Pierce? Yes. We've been tracking Braden Lott's gang. Found what was left of their camp. Also found this. He held up a wanted poster. Holly's younger face stared back at her. Holly Lott wanted for questioning in connection with various robberies. That you, Holly's heart sank. After all this to be arrested now. That's my fiancé you're talking to, Quentin said, stepping slightly in front of her. And she's been living honest for years. That's so. The marshal studied them both. Father Miguel vouches for you, says you've been here helping the mission. That carries weight, but I need to know, where's Braden Lott? Holly made a decision. She pulled out the journal she'd taken, handed it to the marshal. "I don't know where he is, but this might help you find him, and a lot of other people you should be looking for." The marshal flipped through it, his eyes widening. "How did you—" "I took it when I left years ago," Holly lied smoothly. "Been too scared to turn it in, thought he'd kill me for it." The marshal looked at her for a long moment, then pocketed the journal. "Well, seems to me Holly Lot died years ago. All I see here is Mrs. Pierce, soon to be Mrs. Briggs, helping the mission. You planning to stay in the area?" "No, sir," Quentin said. "We're heading north after the wedding. Start fresh." "Good idea." The marshal tipped his hat. "Ma'am, sir, father." They left, and Holly realized she'd been holding her breath. "That journal was your insurance," Quentin said quietly. "It was evidence of crimes. It needed to be in the right hands. Now Braden has no reason not to kill us. He already had none. At least now he might be too busy running from the law to chase us." That night, Holly found Father Miguel in the chapel. "The wedding," she said. "I'm ready." "Are you? Or are you just scared?" "Both. But I've made my decision." Father Miguel studied her. "You know your mother came here once." Holly went still. "What?" "Before you were born, she was trying to escape. Braden begged for sanctuary. I was young, then new to the territory. I turned her away, said I couldn't interfere between a man and his woman." The old priest's voice was heavy with regret. "She died 2 months later, giving birth to you. I've carried that guilt for 28 years. You couldn't have known." "I could have been brave. Instead, I was cautious. I won't make that mistake again." He stood, placed a hand on her shoulder. "If you marry this man, do it for the right reasons, not from fear, but from hope, even if that hope is small as a mustard seed." The wedding took place 3 days later at sunset, with Mary as witness and her baby cooing in the background. Holly wore a simple dress borrowed from one of the mission women. Quentin had shaved his face, looking younger but somehow more vulnerable. Father Miguel spoke the words in Latin and English, both his voice carrying the weight of ceremony and something more, absolution maybe, or blessing for the broken trying to become whole. When it came time for the ring, Quentin produced a band of silver, simple but real. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "Been carrying it for years, don't know why." Holly's hand trembled as he slid it on. It fit perfectly. "You may kiss your bride," Father Miguel said. Quentin leaned in, his lips barely brushing hers. A promise more than a kiss, a seal on whatever strange bargain they'd made. That night, they shared a room for appearance's sake, but Quentin made a pallet on the floor without being asked. Holly lay in the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, her hand unconsciously turning the unfamiliar ring. "Quentin, yes. What was your mother like?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, gentle. She sang while she cooked, always had dirt under her nails from gardening. "She died when I was 12, consumption. Father followed her within the year, broken heart," and the doctor said. "Is that why you joined the cavalry?" "Nowhere else to go, no other family. The army became my home until it wasn't." Holly turned on her side, could just make out his shape in the darkness. "We're a pair, aren't we? 2 orphans trying to make a family from scratch." "Seems like." "What if we fail?" "Then we fail trying. That's better than not trying at all." She thought about that. "Quentin, yes, thank you. For the ring. For everything." Holly, "Yes. That kiss doesn't have to be the only one. Whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready." She didn't answer, but her hand went to her lips, remembering the brief warmth of his. Outside, an owl called, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. The night sounds of Montana familiar as breathing. "Tell me about the house you want to build," she said instead of responding to his statement. "What house?" "The one you'll build for us when we get where we're going." "Tell me about it." So he did, his voice soft in the darkness, painting pictures of rooms and windows, a porch facing east for morning sun, a garden for vegetables and flowers both. Holly listened, and for the first time since Thomas died, she let herself imagine a future. It wasn't the future she'd planned, but maybe she thought, as sleep finally took her, it was the one she needed. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A rider came in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Braden Lott had been spotted 2 valleys over riding with just 3 men. The federal marshals had scattered his gang, but Braden himself had escaped, and he was heading their way. "We leave now," Quentin said, already moving. But Holly stood still, her hand on her growing belly, something hard crystallizing in her chest. "No. Holly, no more running. This is where we make our stand." The mission became a fortress of souls. Father Miguel, against all reason, refused to evacuate. "I've run from Braden Lott's shadow once," he said, looking directly at Holly. "Not again." Word spread through the valley like wildfire. Braden Lott was coming, and the mission was preparing for siege. What happened next surprised everyone, most of all Holly. People came, not to flee, but to stand. First was old Henrik Schultz, the German blacksmith from the valley's far end. He arrived with his 3 sons, all built like oak trees, all carrying rifles. "That devil's gang burned my brother's farm 3 years back," he said simply. Time someone stood up. Then came the widow Martinez with her 2 daughters, fierce women who'd survived Apache raids and worse. The Clearys who'd lost a son to Braden's men. The new schoolteacher from back east, a thin man named David, who surprised everyone by being a crack shot. By the second day, 30 people had gathered at the mission. Farmers, ranchers, drifters, even a few sporting women from the town's less reputable district. Father Miguel welcomed them all. "This is madness," Holly said to Quentin as they watched people fortify the mission walls. "These aren't fighters. They're ordinary people." "So were the folks at the Alamo," Quentin replied. "Sometimes ordinary people do extraordinary things when pushed." "The Alamo didn't end well." "No, but it meant something." Mary found Holly organizing medical supplies, her baby sleeping in a sling across her chest. "They're not here for the mission," she said quietly. "They're here for you." "That's ridiculous. They don't even know me." "They know you stood up to Braden Lott and lived. They know you're carrying a child and still fighting. You give them hope that maybe the devil can be beaten." That evening, Holly stood before the assembled defenders in the chapel. She tried to avoid this, but they'd insisted on hearing from her. Looking at their faces, weathered, determined, afraid, but not backing down, she felt the weight of their faith in her. "I won't lie to you," she began. "Braden Lott is my father. I know what he's capable of. He's cruel smart, and he doesn't value life beyond its usefulness to him." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But he's also arrogant," Holly continued. "He believes fear is stronger than courage, that gold matters more than community. He's wrong. What we have here, people standing together, protecting each other, that's something he's never understood and never will." "Why should we trust you?" called out a voice from the back. "You're his blood." Before Holly could answer, Quentin stood. "Because she gave up everything to escape him. Because she's risking her life and her child's life to stop him. Because blood doesn't determine who we are. Our choices do." "Pretty words," the same voice said. "But I was at Washita River," Quentin said quietly, and the room went still. Everyone knew that name, that shame. "I followed orders that haunted me ever since." Holly could have followed her father's path, could have become what he wanted. Instead, she chose different. We all get to choose who we are. Right here, right now, we're choosing to stand. The silence stretched, then Henrik Schultz spoke up. "I'm not fighting for you, girl. I'm fighting for my son's future. But if you're standing against that devil, then we stand together." One by one, others voiced their agreement. Not ringing endorsements, but pragmatic alliances. It was enough. That night, Holly found herself on watch with David the schoolteacher. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 25, with nervous hands that steadied only when holding a rifle. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You could have gone back east." "I came west to find myself," he said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Sounds foolish now." "No, it doesn't. My father wanted me to be a banker, safe, respectable, boring. I wanted adventure." He gestured at their fortified position. "Careful what you wish for, I suppose." "You could still leave." David was quiet for a moment. "You know what I've learned teaching children out here. They're hungry for stories of heroes. People who stand up when it matters. Maybe I can't be a hero, but I can be part of a story worth telling, even if it ends badly. Especially then. The best stories usually do." Before Holly could respond, a shout went up from the south wall. Riders approaching under a white flag. 3 of them, and even in the darkness, Holly recognized the center figure's posture. Braden Lott had come to talk. They met in the field between the mission and the tree line. Holly Quentin and Father Miguel on one side, Braden and 2 of his remaining men on the other. The white flag fluttered like a ghost in the moonlight. "Hello, daughter," Braden said, his voice carrying that same cold amusement she remembered. "Braden," Holly replied, refusing to call him father. "That's harsh. After all I did for you." "You mean after all you did to me?" Braden's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I made you strong. Look at you now, leading a small army, married to a killer, carrying a child that will have my blood. You're more my daughter than ever. I'm nothing like you. No, you burned my camp, stole from me, turned my own strategies against me. That's pure lot thinking. That's survival, something you taught me despite yourself." Braden's attention shifted to Quentin. "And you, the cavalryman with a conscience. Do you know what you've bound yourself to? A woman worth protecting. A woman carrying another man's child, my grandchild." Braden's eyes glittered. "That baby has lot blood. It'll show eventually. The wildness, the hunger, the willingness to do whatever's necessary. You can't raise that out of a child." "We'll see," Quentin said evenly. "Indeed we will, because I'm making you an offer." Braden leaned forward. "Give me the child when it's born. I'll raise it proper, make it strong. In exchange, I leave you all in peace. The mission, the town, everyone walks away clean." "No," Holly said immediately. "Think about it. That child will always be hunted, always be marked as my blood. With me, it'll be protected, powerful. With you, it'll be just another farmer's brat fighting the land for scraps. With us, it'll be loved," Holly said. "That's something you never understood." "Love." Braden spat the word. "Love makes you weak. Your mother loved you, and it killed her. Your husband loved you, and where is he now?" Holly felt rage rise in her chest, hot and familiar. "Don't you dare. I'm offering you a way out, girl. Take it, or I'll take what's mine anyway. You've got 3 days to decide." "We've already decided." Father Miguel spoke for the first time. "This child will be raised in God's grace, not your corruption." Braden looked at the priest with contempt. "God's grace. Where was that when I was burning missions from here to Mexico? Where was it when I took what I wanted from whoever I wanted?" He turned back to Holly. 3 days. Then I come for what's mine." They watched him ride away, and Holly felt the weight of inevitability settling on her shoulders. "He'll attack at dawn on the 3rd day," she said. "That's his pattern. He likes the symbolism." "Then we'll be ready," Quentin said. "Will we?" "He's right about one thing. This baby will always carry his blood. What if—" "Stop." Quentin took her shoulders, turned her to face him. "That baby is Thomas's child. Yours. The love you shared created it. Braden's blood might run in its veins, but your love will shape its heart." "You really believe that?" "I have to. We all have to." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. The mission women made bandages while the men reinforced walls. Children were sent to the root cellar with the elderly. Everyone who could hold a weapon was given one. Holly found herself working beside the widow Martinez loading ammunition. The older woman's hands were steady practiced. "I had 10 children," the widow said suddenly. "Lost 6 to fever, violence, or accident. The 4 that lived are scattered from California to Texas. I'm sorry." "Don't be. They're alive, making their own paths. That's all a mother can hope for, that her children outlive her and find their own way. Even if that way leads them far from you. Especially then. Love isn't about keeping them close. It's about giving them wings strong enough to fly." That night, Holly couldn't sleep. She walked the mission grounds, found others awake too. David was teaching some of the younger men to shoot. The sporting women were sharpening knives with practiced efficiency. Henrik's sons were praying with Father Miguel. This wasn't just about her anymore. It had become something larger, a community choosing to stand against the darkness that had terrorized them for years. She found Quentin on the bell tower, keeping watch. Climbed up to sit beside him, their shoulders touching in the small space. "Scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're sane." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Holly said, "If something happens to me, it won't. But if it does, promise me you'll take the baby far from here. Raise it as your own. Never tell it about Braden." "Holly, promise me." Quentin turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. "I promise. But nothing's happening to you. We're going to survive this, raise that child together, and build that house I told you about." "Together," Holly repeated, tasting the word. It felt foreign, but not unpleasant. "Can I tell you something?" Quentin asked. "Yes." "I'm falling in love with you." Holly's breath caught. "Quentin, I know you're not ready, maybe won't ever be, but I needed to say it in case, well, in case." She looked at him, this man who'd appeared at her darkest moment and refused to leave, who'd married her to protect a child that wasn't his, who stood ready to die for people he barely knew. "I don't love you," she said carefully. "Not yet, but I think maybe I could. Someday. If we have time. Then let's make sure we have time." He kissed her, then different from their wedding kiss. This one held promise and fear and desperate hope, all tangled together. Holly kissed him back, surprising herself with the wanting of it. When they pulled apart, she was breathing hard. "That complicates things." "Everything about us is complicated. What's one more thing? Dawn would come too soon, bringing Braden and whatever violence he'd orchestrated. But for now, they had this moment. 2 people finding each other in the darkness, building something fragile and precious from the ruins of their pasts. Below them, the mission slept fitfully, full of ordinary people preparing to do an extraordinary thing. And Holly realized Mary had been right. They weren't really here for the mission or even for justice. They were here because sometimes when enough broken people stand together, they become whole. They become family. They become unbreakable. The third dawn was coming, but they would meet it together. The third dawn came painted in blood-red clouds, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. Holly stood on the mission wall, watching the horizon, Thomas's Navy Colt heavy on her hip. The baby moved inside her for the first time, just a flutter like a bird testing its wings. "I feel you," she whispered, hand on her belly. "Stay strong, little one. Today we fight for your future." Quentin appeared beside her, rifle in hand. "Anything?" "Not yet, but he's out there. I can feel him." The mission had become eerily quiet. 43 souls ready to fight another 20 hiding in the cellars. Father Miguel had held service at 4 in the morning, blessing weapons alongside souls. Even those who didn't believe had bowed their heads. "Holly," David's voice from the south tower, urgent. Dust cloud coming fast, but it wasn't from the south that Braden struck. The first fire arrow came from the north, hitting the barn's dry roof. Then another and another. Within minutes, fires bloomed across the mission like deadly flowers. "Water brigades!" Holly shouted, but even as people rushed with buckets, she knew it was a distraction. The main attack came from the east. 15 riders, maybe 20 more than Braden should have had. He'd recruited, probably promising shares of whatever wealth he thought the mission held. Where did he find them? Quentin muttered, sighting down his rifle. Every territory has men willing to kill for gold, Holly replied. He would have promised them riches and women. The first wave hit the walls like thunder. Gunfire erupted from both sides, deafening in the morning air. Holly saw Henrik's oldest son take a bullet in the shoulder, keep firing with his other arm. One of the sporting women, Clara Holly remembered, dropped 2 riders before a third shot caught her in the chest. The barn, someone screamed. The structure was fully engulfed now, and worse. The wind was pushing flames toward the main buildings, but they couldn't spare people to fight it, not with Braden's men scaling the walls. Holly shot a man trying to climb over near the chapel, watched him fall backward into the dust. No satisfaction in it, just grim necessity. Another took his place immediately. They're breaking through the south gate. Quentin was already moving, Holly following. The gate had been their weak point. Old wood, rusted hinges. Now it splintered under the impact of riders charging through. David stood in their path, rifle steady, fear nowhere on his young face. He dropped one rider too before a bullet took him in the stomach. He went down, still firing, still fighting. David. Holly ran to him, but Quentin pulled her back as more riders poured through. The courtyard became chaos. Hand-to-hand fighting, gun smoke so thick it burned the lungs. Holly lost sight of Quentin in the melee, focused on staying alive, keeping moving. Then she heard it, a child crying. Not Mary's baby, but one of the hidden children somehow outside the cellar. A little girl, maybe 5, standing frozen as horses and violence swirled around her. Holly didn't think. She ran, scooping up the child just as a rider bore down on them. The man's saber was already swinging when a shot rang out. The rider toppled, and Holly saw Mary standing there, smoking rifle in her hands, baby strapped to her back. "Get her to safety," Mary shouted, already turning to fire again. Holly ran for the chapel, the child clinging to her neck. Behind her, the battle raged. The mission's defenders were holding barely, but more of Braden's men kept coming. Inside the chapel, Father Miguel was tending wounded. The floor was slick with blood moans of pain echoing off the walls. Holly handed the child to one of the women and grabbed medical supplies. "We're losing," Father Miguel said quietly, pressing cloth to a spurting wound. "Not yet," Holly said, but she knew he was right. They were outnumbered, outgunned. It was only a matter of time. That's when she heard Braden's voice clear above the carnage. "Holly, daughter, end this, come out and face me." She stood slowly. Father Miguel grabbed her arm. "Don't. It's what he wants." "I know, but maybe I can buy time. The federal marshals aren't coming. We're alone in this." Holly pulled free gently. "Then I'll face him alone. It's me he wants." "Holly, no." Quentin burst through the chapel doors, covered in blood and dirt. "Don't you dare." "It's my fight," she said. "It always has been." "Our fight," he corrected fiercely. "Remember together." She looked at him, this man who'd become her husband, her protector, maybe someday her love. Together, she agreed. They walked out side by side into sudden stillness. The fighting had paused, both sides watching as Holly and Quentin emerged. The courtyard was a battlefield, bodies, scattered buildings, burning smoke turning the morning sun into a diseased orange disk. Braden sat his horse in the center of it, all looking untouched by the violence. His remaining men formed a semicircle behind him. Holly counted 12 still standing. The mission had maybe 15 defenders left standing. "There's my girl," Braden said, smiling that cold smile. "Ready to end this foolishness." "Yes," Holly said. "Single combat, you and me. If I win, your men leave. If you win." She touched her belly. "You get what you came for." "Holly, no," Quentin hissed, but Braden was already laughing. "You think I'd fight a pregnant woman? I'm many things' daughter, but not that kind of monster. No, I'll fight your husband, man to man. Winner takes all. You, the child, everything." "I accept," Quentin said before Holly could protest. "No." Holly turned to him. You don't understand. He's never lost a fight. Never. First time for everything, Quentin said quietly. Trust me. Braden dismounted, removed his coat with theatrical slowness. Knives, he said. Guns are too quick. I want to enjoy this. They cleared a space in the courtyard. The mission's defenders lined one side, Braden's men the other. Holly stood with Father Miguel, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Braden pulled a Bowie knife, the blade gleaming. Quentin drew his own knife, smaller but well-balanced. They circled each other, predators sizing up prey. Braden struck first, faster than a man his age should be. Quentin barely dodged the blade, whisking past his ribs. They engaged, steel ringing against steel bodies, moving in deadly dance. Quentin was good. Holly could see his cavalry training in his footwork, his discipline. But Braden was better. Decades of killing had made him an artist of violence. He opened a cut on Quentin's arm, another on his thigh, wearing him down with patient cruelty. You're weak, Braden taunted. Like all soldiers, following rules, fighting fair. There's no fair in real life, boy. He proved it by throwing dirt in Quentin's eyes, following with a vicious slash that opened Quentin's chest. Quentin went down to one knee, blood soaking his shirt. Stop! Holly started forward, but Father Miguel held her back. Have faith, the priest whispered. Braden stood over Quentin, savoring the moment. Any last words for my daughter? Quentin looked up, and despite the blood, despite the pain, he smiled. Yeah, you talk too much. His hand came up from the dirt, not with a weapon, but with the small pistol he'd hidden there earlier. Holly recognized it as David's must have fallen during the battle. The shot was point blank, taking Braden in the stomach. Braden staggered back, looking down at the spreading red stain with genuine surprise. You cheated. Learned from the best, apparently. Quentin gasped, struggling to stand. Braden fell to his knees, knife dropping from nerveless fingers. His men started forward, but Holly stepped between them and Quentin Thomas's Navy Colt in her hand. It's over, she said, voice carrying across the courtyard. Your leader's dying. You can die with him, or you can ride away. Choose. The outlaws looked at each other, at Braden coughing blood into the dirt, at the mission defenders ready to fight to the last. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Jake, Braden wheezed. Holly's childhood protector stepped forward, older, grayer, but still standing. He looked at Holly for a long moment, then at Braden. She's right, boss. It's over. You betraying me too? No. I'm saving what's left of us. Jake turned to his men. We're leaving. Now. They mounted up, and Jake paused beside Holly. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. You became what she never could. Free. As they rode away, Holly knelt beside her father. Braden was dying badly, the gut wound ensuring a slow, agonizing end. His blue eyes, so like hers, were already clouding. I could have made you great, he gasped. You made me strong, Holly admitted. But Thomas made me good, and this child will be both. My blood will be just one part of who they become, the smallest part. Braden tried to speak again, but only blood came. He died looking at the smoke-filled sky, reaching for something that was never there. Holly stood, slowly turned to find Quentin being supported by Henrik's sons. He was pale blood loss, making him sway, but alive. You stupid brave fool, she said, tears finally coming. Learned from the best. He repeated, managing a weak smile before passing out. The next hours blurred together, putting out fires, tending wounded, counting the dead. They'd lost 12 defenders, including David and Clara, but they'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. As the sun set, Holly sat beside Quentin's bed in the chapel. Father Miguel had stitched him up, said he'd survive if infection didn't set in. She held his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength, even in unconsciousness. I think I might love you, she whispered to his sleeping form. God help me, I think I might. Mary appeared with Soup, her baby, peaceful in her arms. The federal marshals just arrived, day late as usual. Let them come. It's finished. Is it? There'll be questions, investigations. Holly touched her belly, felt the baby move again, stronger this time. Let them investigate. We fought for our home, our families. That's all anyone needs to know. Father Miguel entered looking exhausted but satisfied. The marshal wants to speak with you. Tomorrow, Holly said. Tonight I'm staying here. The priest nodded, understanding. David's last words, he said softly. He said to tell you it was a story worth being part of. Holly's tears came fresh. It was. He was. As night fell over the mission, the survivors gathered in the courtyard. Someone had found a fiddle, and slow, mournful music drifted through the air. Not a celebration, too much loss for that, but an acknowledgement. They'd stood together. They'd survived. Quentin stirred eyes opening to find Holly there. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey yourself. You scared me." "Sorry. Had to make it dramatic. You said your father never lost. He never fought someone with something worth fighting for." Quentin squeezed her hand weakly. "The baby. Fine. Strong. Like its parents. All three of them. 3. Thomas gave it life. You're giving it a future. I'm giving it hope." She leaned down, kissed his forehead. "Rest now. We have time." Outside, the mission bell rang, not in alarm but in memoriam, for the fallen, for the saved, for the future being born from the ashes of the past. Braden Lott was dead. His legacy of fear was broken, and in its place something new was growing. A community forged in fire, a family bound by choice rather than blood, a love earned through sacrifice and courage. Holly sat through the night, keeping watch over Quentin, one hand on his chest, feeling each breath, the other on her belly, feeling each movement of new life. They'd won more than a battle. They'd won the right to their own story, and it was just beginning. 6 weeks after the battle, Quentin finally walked without wincing. The chest wound had healed into a twisted scar that Holly traced with her fingers in the quiet mornings before the mission woke. They'd moved into a small adobe house. Father Miguel offered them 2 rooms and a garden plot, nothing fancy but theirs. The federal investigation had been surprisingly brief. Marshal Collins, the same man who'd taken Braden's journal, seemed more interested in closing cases than opening new ones. "Seems to me," he'd said, studying the battlefield, "a notorious outlaw attacked a mission and got what he deserved. Unless anyone disagrees." No one disagreed. Now Holly stood in that garden teaching Mary how to tell when tomatoes were ready for picking. Mary's baby, stronger now, gurgled from a basket in the shade. The young woman had decided to stay taking work at the mission school. "You saved my life," Mary said suddenly. "Twice. 3 times if you count giving me hope." "You saved mine too," Holly replied. "That shot in the courtyard. I meant after, when I was ready to give up, you showed me women like us could survive, could choose something better." Before Holly could respond, she felt it, a sharp pain across her middle, then wetness down her legs. "Holly, get Quentin!" Holly gasped. "Get Father Miguel's wife. The baby's coming." What followed was 18 hours of labor that made the battle seem easy by comparison. Holly had helped deliver calves, and foals had seen her share of birth and death. But this was different. This was her body trying to turn itself inside out. "You're doing fine," Mrs. Miguel soothed the elderly Mexican woman's hands, gentle and sure. "First babies take their time." "Thomas's baby?" Holly panted between contractions. "Stubborn like him." Quentin sat beside her, letting her crush his hand with each wave of pain. He didn't speak much, just stayed steady, present, anchoring her to the world when the pain tried to carry her away. "I can't," she said, at hour 15, exhausted, drenched in sweat. "You can," Quentin said firmly. "You faced down Braden Lott. You survived losing everything. You can do this. This is different." "No. It's the same. It's choosing life over death, fighting for what matters. And you're the strongest fighter I know." The sun was setting when the baby finally came screaming and red and perfect. A girl with dark hair like Holly's and Thomas's chin. When Mrs. Miguel placed her on Holly's chest, the world narrowed to just that weight, that warmth, those unfocused eyes seeking something familiar in an unfamiliar world. "She's beautiful," Quentin whispered, and Holly heard tears in his voice. "Do you want to hold her?" He pulled back. "She's not. I'm not. You're her father now, if you want to be." Quentin's hand shook as he took the baby, holding her like spun glass. The infant quieted, staring up at him with that mysterious intensity newborns possess. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm not your blood father, but I promise I'll love you like one. I'll teach you to ride and shoot and read the weather. I'll tell you stories about your real father, how brave he was, how much he loved your mother, and I'll try to be worthy of carrying on his legacy." Holly felt her heart crack and mend simultaneously. "What should we name her? You choose." Holly looked at her daughter, this piece of Thomas that would live on this proof that love was stronger than loss. "Grace, for the mercy we've been shown, for the second chances." "Grace Pierce Briggs," Quentin said, testing it. "Strong name for a strong girl." The weeks that followed were a blur of feeding, changing, walking a crying baby through endless nights. Holly's body slowly recovered, though she felt fundamentally changed, as if giving birth had reorganized her very bones. The mission community embraced Grace as their own. She was passed from arm to arm after Sunday services, fussed over by hardened ranchers and reformed outlaws alike. "Takes a village," Father Miguel said, watching Henrik's sons make silly faces at the baby. "Or a mission full of misfits," Holly replied. One morning, Holly woke to find Quentin gone, Grace's cradle empty. Panic shot through her until she heard his voice from the garden, low and melodic. She found him sitting under the apple tree, Grace in his arms, singing a lullaby she didn't recognize. "My mother sang it," he explained when he saw her. "Just remembered it." Holly sat beside them, still in her nightdress, not caring who might see. "You're good with her. She's easy to love." "Quentin," Holly started, then stopped. "How did you tell someone you were learning to love them, that grief was slowly making room for something new?" "I know," he said quietly. "There's no rush." But that night, Holly kissed him first. Not desperate or passionate, but intentional. A choice. "I'm ready to try," she said against his lips. "Try what? Being truly married, being us." They made love for the first time with Grace sleeping in the next room, gentle and careful, learning each other's bodies like new territory. After Holly cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she could feel this again, want this again. "I'll never be Thomas," Quentin said, holding her. "I don't want you to be. I want you to be you, the man who saved me, who fought for me, who chose us." As autumn came to the valley, the mission began to rebuild and expand. The battle had somehow transformed it from a way station to a real community. People who'd come to fight stayed to build. New families arrived, drawn by stories of the place where ordinary folks had stood against evil and won. Holly started a school, with Mary teaching children to read and write. Quentin worked with Henrik, training horses and building homes for newcomers. Grace grew fat and happy, crawling through the dust, babbling at everyone who'd listen. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived on a cold October morning, carried by a well-dressed lawyer from Denver. Holly read it 3 times before the words made sense. "Thomas's uncle died," she told Quentin, stunned. "The one in California. He left everything to Thomas. And since Thomas is gone to his heir, to Grace. Everything. A ranch. 2,000 acres in the San Joaquin Valley. Cattle horses, enough money to run it properly." Quentin set down the hammer he'd been holding. "That's That's a fortune. It's a new life, if we want it. They sat with the possibility for days discussing it in the quiet hours while Grace slept. California meant leaving the mission, the community they'd fought for. But it also meant safety, prosperity, a future Grace could build on. What would Thomas want? Quentin asked finally. He'd want Grace to have opportunities, education, choices. Holly touched the letter. This gives her all of that. Then we go. Just like that. Holly, I'd follow you to California or hell itself. Geography doesn't matter. Family does. The mission threw them a farewell gathering that lasted 2 days. Stories were told, tears shed, promises made to visit. Father Miguel blessed them one last time, pressing a small wooden cross into Grace's tiny hand. For protection, he said then to Holly and Quentin, you've earned your happiness. Don't be afraid to take it. Henrik and his sons built them a proper wagon reinforced for the long journey. Mary wept, holding Holly tight. You saved me, she said again. We saved each other, Holly corrected. Keep saving others. That's how we honor the ones we lost. They left on a morning when frost sparkled on the grass like scattered diamonds. The wagon was loaded with everything they owned. Not much, but enough. Grace rode in a sling across Holly's chest, eyes wide at the vast world opening before them. As they crested the ridge above the valley, Holly asked Quentin to stop. She looked back at the mission, the place where she'd nearly died, where she'd fought for life, where she'd learned to love again. No regrets? Quentin asked. None. I found my purpose here. Found you. Found Grace. How could I regret that? They traveled for 6 weeks, following trails Quentin knew from his cavalry days, through Colorado's high passes where snow already crowned the peaks, across Utah's red desert, where the rocks looked like God's own sculpture, into Nevada's silver country where boom towns rose and fell like tides. Grace saw her first eagle in Wyoming, laughed at prairie dogs. In Utah, cried at the vastness of the salt flats. Holly kept a journal recording every moment, knowing someday Grace would want to know about this journey, this beginning of her real life. They met other travelers, Mormons heading to establish new settlements, Chinese workers returning from railroad camps, former slaves seeking truly free territory. Around campfires, stories were shared, cultures mixed, America's great experiment playing out in miniature. One night in Nevada, they camped beside a family of freed slaves traveling to San Francisco. The patriarch, a man named Samuel, shared their fire and his story. 30 years in bondage, 5 years of freedom heading west because west is where tomorrow lives. You got yourselves a beautiful baby, Samuel's wife Esther said, holding Grace with practiced ease. She's gonna grow up in a different world than we did. God willing, Holly said. More than God, Esther replied. Takes people willing to fight for that different world. Like you folks did at that mission. We heard the story 3 towns back. Holly was surprised. The story's traveling. Good stories always do. Gives people hope. That night, Quentin played harmonica, badly, while Samuel's grandson danced and Grace clapped her pudgy hands. Holly watched her daughter Thomas's child surrounded by this improvised family of strangers becoming friends and felt something she hadn't experienced since before, the fever, pure, uncomplicated joy. They reached California in late November when the rains had just started turning the hills green. The ranch sprawled across a valley so fertile it hurt to look at. Dark soil, oak groves, a river running year-round. The house was modest but solid, built by Thomas's uncle with care and craft. Home, Quentin asked, holding Grace while Holly walked through the rooms. She touched the walls, imagined Thomas here, wondered if he'd ever dreamed of this place. Then she looked at Quentin and Grace, her unexpected family, her second chance. Home, she agreed. They spent their first night in the house making plans. Where to plant the garden, how to expand the barn, which room would be Grace's when she was older. Practical dreams, but dreams nonetheless. As Holly nursed Grace before bed, Quentin sat beside them reading from a book of poetry he'd bought in Sacramento. His voice was rough from the trail, but gentle, turning words into lullabies. "I love you," Holly said, suddenly surprising herself with the truth of it. Quentin looked up from the book. "You do, I do. Not the same as I loved Thomas. Different. Quieter maybe, but deeper. Like a river instead of a thunderstorm." "I'll take a river," Quentin said, setting the book aside to kiss her. "Rivers last longer than storms." That night, with Grace finally sleeping in her new cradle, Holly and Quentin made love in their new bed, in their new home, starting their new life. Outside, rain fell soft on California soil, promising growth, promising harvest, promising tomorrow. In the morning, they would begin the real work. Building a ranch, raising a daughter, creating the life Thomas had dreamed of and Quentin had fought for. There would be challenges Holly knew, droughts and floods, market crashes, and cattle diseases. Grace would ask questions about her real father, about the violence that preceded her birth. But tonight, with her daughter safe and her husband beside her, Holly Pierce Briggs felt something she'd thought lost forever in that Montana cemetery peace. The past was buried, but not forgotten. The future was uncertain, but not feared. And the present, this moment, this breath, this life, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 5 years later, spring 1885, San Joaquin Valley, California. The wedding was supposed to be small, just family and a few neighbors. Holly had insisted. But word spread the way it does in farming communities, and by the morning of the ceremony, their ranch was overflowing with wagons, horses, and people who'd traveled from 3 counties away to see Mary marry the schoolteacher from San Francisco. "I blame you for this," Holly said to Quentin, watching him direct traffic in their yard. "Me. You're the one who saved her life. People remember that." Mary stood in Grace's room, because of course the 5-year-old had insisted on helping the bride prepare, wearing a dress Holly had sewn from cream silk ordered special from Sacramento. Her baby, now a sturdy boy of 5 named Daniel, was carrying the rings. "You're beautiful," Grace announced with the authority only a child could muster, "like a princess in Papa's stories." "Your papa tells you princess stories?" Mary asked, amused. "Both my papas do," Grace said matter-of-factly. "Papa Quentin tells me fairy tales, and Papa Thomas tells me stories through Mama about when he was brave." Holly's heart squeezed, as it always did when Grace mentioned Thomas. They'd told her the truth, age-appropriate versions of it from the beginning. She knew Quentin wasn't her blood father, but had chosen to be her papa, so she knew Thomas was in heaven watching over her. "Mama," Grace said, "will I have 2 papas at my wedding too?" "Maybe," Holly said, fixing a flower in Mary's hair. "Or maybe you'll be too busy having adventures to get married at all." Like Aunt Clara, Holly smiled. Clara, not the one who died at the mission, but Quentin's sister, very much alive and visiting from Boston, had arrived last week with stories of her work as a journalist that had captivated Grace entirely. Exactly like Aunt Clara. The ceremony took place under the oak trees Thomas's uncle had planted 30 years ago. Father Miguel had traveled from the mission to officiate older, now moving slower, but his voice still strong as he spoke about redemption's second chances and the family we choose. Holly stood as Mary's matron of honor, Quentin as the groom's best man. Grace scattered rose petals with intense concentration, while Daniel kept dropping the rings, chasing after them with increasing frustration. Watching Mary pledge herself to Robert, the gentle school teacher who'd courted her for 2 patient years, Holly remembered her own desperate wedding to Quentin, how far they'd all come from that moment of necessity to this celebration of choice. After the ceremony, as the party spilled across their property, Holly found herself at Thomas's memorial. They'd built it overlooking the valley. Not a grave since his body lay in Montana, but a place to remember. A simple stone bench under a planted pine with his name and dates. "You'd be proud," she said quietly. Grace is strong and smart and kind. The ranch is thriving. We're happy, Thomas. I hope that's okay." A hand touched her shoulder, Quentin always knowing when she needed him. "He'd want you happy," Quentin said. "I know. It's just days like this, I feel the weight of both lives, the one I lost and the one I found." "That's not weight. That's richness. You get to carry both loves, both stories." Grace ran up her flower girl dress, already dirty from playing with the other children. "Mama, Papa, Uncle Jake is here." Holly's blood chilled. Jake, from Braden's gang. But when she turned, she saw an old man weathered beyond his years, standing uncertain at the edge of the celebration. "I'll handle this," Quentin said, but Holly stopped him. "No, I need to hear what he has to say." Jake had his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "Mrs. Briggs, Mr. Briggs, I'm sorry to intrude. How did you find us?" "Stories travel. Heard about the wedding from a trader in Fresno." He looked at Grace, something soft crossing his hard features. "She looks like you, but she's got her grandfather's eyes." "She has her father's eyes," Holly corrected coldly. "Thomas's eyes." "Of course. I'm sorry." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I came to give you something, and to tell you something." From his saddlebag, he pulled out a leather-wrapped bundle. Inside was money, a lot of it, and a photograph Holly had never seen. Her mother, young and lovely, holding an infant. "Where did you get this?" "Your father kept it hidden. The money's what was left of his stash, scattered in various places. Took me 5 years to gather it all. The photo, he always had it, even at the end." Holly stared at her mother's face, seeing her own features reflected there. "Why bring these to me?" "Because I'm dying. Doctor says I got maybe a month, and I needed to make one thing right." Jake looked at Grace again, who was hiding behind Holly's skirts but peering out curiously. "Your mother tried to run once when you were about her age. Braden caught her, brought her back. She never tried again. I think she stayed to protect you." "That doesn't excuse—" "No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses what we did. But I wanted you to know she loved you. And in his twisted way, so did Braden." "Love doesn't look like that," Quentin said firmly. "No, sir, it doesn't. Real love looks like this." Jake gestured at the wedding, the ranch, the life they'd built. "You folks did good. Real good." He turned to go, then stopped. "That journal you gave the marshals, it worked. Everyone involved got what was coming. The gang scattered to the wind or dead. That chapter's closed." "Good," Holly said simply. Jake nodded, set his hat back on his head. "I'll be going now. Just tell the little one her bloodline includes monsters and heroes both. Make sure she knows she gets to choose which." After he left, Holly stood holding the photograph, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Quentin wrapped his arms around her from behind. Grace hugged her legs from the front. "You okay, Mama?" Grace asked, worried. "Yes, sweetheart. Just remembering." "Is that your mama in the picture?" "It is. She's pretty, like you." Holly knelt down to Grace's level. "You know what's more important than pretty." "What?" "Being brave, being kind, making good choices even when they're hard. Like you did. Like we all did. Papa Quentin, Aunt Mary, everyone here. We all made hard choices to build something better." That evening, as the sun set over their valley, the wedding party transformed into something more. Samuel and Esther, the freed slaves they'd met on the trail, had arrived with their family. Henrik and his sons had traveled from the mission. Even some of the sporting women who'd survived the battle came now running a respectable boarding house in Sacramento. Someone brought out a fiddle, then a guitar. Music filled the air. Mexican ballads, Irish reels, Negro spirituals, all blending into something uniquely American. Grace danced on Quentin's feet, while Holly watched her heart so full it ached. "Speech," someone called out. "Speech from the bride." Mary stood radiant in the lantern light. 5 years ago, I was ready to die. Holly and Quentin saved me, brought me to Father Miguel's mission, gave me hope. Now I'm a teacher, a mother, a wife. If that's not proof of miracles, I don't know what is. To miracles, someone toasted. To second chances, another added. To family blood or chosen. This from Clara Quentin's sister, who'd been documenting the whole day with her newfangled camera. As the party continued, Holly found herself back at Thomas's memorial, this time with Grace asleep in her arms. The little girl had worn herself out with joy, her face still paint-streaked from the games. "Thank you," Holly whispered to the stone, "for loving me, for giving me her, for leading me to this life even if the path was brutal." Quentin appeared with a blanket wrapping it around them. "Clara wants to write our story for her newspaper back east. Our story, the mission fight, how we met, all of it." Holly considered this. What would you tell her? The truth. That sometimes life breaks you so completely you think you'll never be whole again. But if you're lucky, if you're brave, you find other broken people and you build something new together. Not perfect, but real. That's our story. Part of it. The rest is still being written. Grace stirred in Holly's arms, mumbling something about horses and flowers. Holly kissed her daughter's head, breathed in her little girl's scent of dirt and sunshine. "I never thought I'd be here," Holly admitted. "Happy, whole, loved." "Where did you think you'd be?" "Dead. That morning you found me, I was so sure my story was over. But it wasn't. No, it was just changing chapters." They sat together as the party wound down as friends, old and new, said their farewells. Mary and Robert left for their honeymoon in San Francisco, Daniel staying with Holly and Quentin. The ranch settled into nighttime quiet, peaceful as a held breath. Later, after Grace and Daniel were asleep in their beds, Holly and Quentin stood on their porch, looking out over their land. The mustard was blooming between the vine rows, yellow as hope in the moonlight. Quentin, I'm pregnant." He turned to her, eyes wide. "What?" "About 2 months along. I wanted to be sure before I told you." "Holly." His voice broke. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "Really? Really? Your child, Quentin. Yours and mine." He was crying now. She could feel the tears against her neck. "I never thought. I never dared hope." "I know. Neither did I." They stood there holding each other, holding their future. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Running a ranch, raising children, navigating a world still violent and uncertain. But tonight, they had this love earned through fire, family forged from loss, hope blooming from ashes. "What do you want to name it?" Quentin asked. "If it's a boy, Thomas. If it's a girl," Holly smiled. "Faith. For what brought us through. For what carries us forward." 6 months later, Faith Briggs was born during a thunderstorm that reminded Holly of Montana. But this time, the storm brought life, not death. Grace held her sister with reverent care, declaring herself the protector. Daniel, visiting with Mary and Robert, offered the baby his favorite wooden horse. Father Miguel, too frail now to travel, sent a blessing by letter from sorrow joy, from ending beginning, from death life. This is the miracle of grace, the promise of faith, the triumph of love. Clara published the story in papers across the East. Letters poured in from women who'd lost everything, from men seeking redemption from families broken and rebuilding. Holly answered when she could, always with the same message: keep going, keep fighting, keep believing in tomorrow. Years flowed like the river through their valley. Grace grew tall and fierce, becoming the doctor the valley desperately needed. Faith inherited Quentin's steady nature and Holly's steel spine, eventually taking over the ranch. Both girls knew their whole story: the violence that preceded them, the love that created them, the courage that protected them. On Holly and Quentin's 20th wedding anniversary, surrounded by grandchildren from both Grace and Faith, Holly stood in the same spot where they'd married in Father Miguel's mission all those years ago. Was it worth it? Quentin asked, his hair silver now, but his eyes still warm. All the pain that brought us here, Holly thought of Thomas forever young in her memory, of her mother whose photograph sat on their mantel, of Braden whose death had freed them all, of David and Clara and all who'd fallen at the mission. Every scar, she said, every tear, every loss, because it led to this. As the sun set over the California valley, painting the sky in shades of hope, Holly Pierce Briggs understood at last the truth she'd spent a lifetime learning. Love isn't about never losing. It's about being brave enough to build again from the ruins, to plant seeds in scorched earth, to trust that morning follows even the darkest night. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get to live long enough to see those seeds become a forest sheltering the next generation from storms you once faced alone. That was their story. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A testament to the human heart's capacity to endure, to transform, to love again after loss. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end. Your life is over if you marry me, she warned. Then let's end it together, he replied. And from that ending, a beginning. From that death, a life. From that sorrow, joy everlasting.